For this project, my son Barry and I flew from Amman, Jordan, where I live, to Cairo in Egypt. And then we took a very long drive south, up the Nile River, to the ruins on the Nile's east bank called locally Tel El Amarna. So we are here at Tel El Amarna, and in 1887, this is the place where the Amarna Letters were discovered. In 1887, Wallace Budge, who worked for the British Museum, was actually under house arrest in Luxor when he was brought these clay tablets with cuneiform writing on them, which ended up being one of the most remarkable discoveries in all of biblical archaeology. Budge wrote,
"A man arrived, bringing with him some half-dozen of the clay tablets which had been found accidentally by a woman at Tel El Amarna, and he asked me to look at them and to tell him if they were genuine or forgeries. Whilst I was examining the half-dozen tablets, a second man arrived with 76 more of the tablets, some of them quite large. I felt certain that the tablets were both genuine and of great historical importance."
Budge believed that these tablets were addressed to the king of Egypt, and this was confirmed in 1891 when the British archaeologist Flinders Petrie started excavating at Tel El Amarna and found that it was the capital called Akhetaten. What makes these tablets so significant is what is written on them, and many of them are written from the kings of the Canaanite city-states. And together, these form the most powerful evidence outside of the Bible for the Israelite conquest of the Promised Land. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button. I'll leave a link in the description where you can order a copy of my book, Where God Came Down, the Archaeological Evidence. Thanks for making it #1 in archaeology. I'll also leave a link where you can make a tax-deductible donation. These are greatly appreciated and used for the production of future videos. So we are in Tel El Amarna, and behind me here is an administrative building that in 1887 a local woman was digging, probably for agricultural reasons, and she found a cuneiform tablet. This led to locals finding more tablets here, and then they were sold to local dealers who then sold them to others. And this is how the hundreds of cuneiform tablets found right here, known as the Amarna Letters, ended up in museums and private collections around the world. So after the frenzy of bartering and buying was over, then the largest cache of tablets from Amarna went to the museum in Berlin. So I went to Berlin to see this amazing collection of 160 Amarna Letters, and I was greatly disappointed because I could only find one of them on display.
So I've searched through all of the museums here in Berlin. The only place that I can find the Amarna Letters on display is this one Amarna letter here, which is written from Jerusalem, the king of Jerusalem, and sent to the Pharaoh of Egypt, Amenhotep III.
This is the label for this tablet, which is in German, but the English translation reads, "Letter from the city mayor Abdi Hepa of Jerusalem to Amenhotep III." At this time, Jerusalem was a Canaanite city-state, and its ruler's name was Abdi Hepa, also spelled Heba. And to his own people, Abdi Heba was a king, but when he was addressing the Pharaoh of Egypt, he took on the lesser title of mayor. And this was the typical relationship between the rulers of Canaan and the throne of Egypt. Just to be clear, tablet number 288 was sent from Jerusalem to Amenhotep III in Thebes, and later moved to the royal archive found at Tel El Amarna. Akhenaten is the son of Amenhotep III, and he began his reign as Amenhotep IV. But at some point after the death of his father, he began worshiping the sun disk Aten and changed his name from Amenhotep IV to Akhenaten, and he moved his capital from Thebes to Akhetaten. And so this is where his palace was, this is where his royal archive was, and this is where this tablet came from that's on display in Berlin. But interestingly, it's not addressed to Akhenaten. It's addressed to his father, Amenhotep III. And this is the case with several of the letters that are coming from Canaan, being addressed to Amenhotep III. And what this means is that when Akhenaten moved his capital from Thebes, then he took at least some of the royal archive with him, which then later would eventually be discovered at Tel El Amarna. So this letter that is on display in the Berlin Museum, what does it actually say? Message of Abdi Heba. The land of the king is lost. I am at war. I am situated like a ship in the midst of the sea. Now the Habiru have taken the very cities of the king. Not a single mayor remains to the king, my lord. All are lost. The king does nothing. May the king provide archers. If there are no archers this year, all the lands of the king, my lord, are lost. After seeing this Berlin tablet, I wanted to go back to Jerusalem just to take in the context of what this letter describes. So behind me are the ruins of Jerusalem, and in the Amarna letter, the Canaanite ruler of the city's name is Abdi Heba, and he is one of the most vocal of the Canaanite rulers during this period. What Abdi Heba is doing is like the others, he's asking the Pharaoh for military help. The Habiru he describes as coming in and taking over all the land of Jerusalem. And he describes at one point Jerusalem being like a ship in the midst of the sea. The king of Jerusalem says that he is at war with the people that he calls the Habiru. And so the obvious question is, who are the Habiru? And we have a way that we can examine this. We can examine in the Amarna Letters the details of the events covered there, and then we can look at other historical sources and the details found there. And if we have a match between historical sources, then we can clearly identify who the Habiru people are. And this letter of Jerusalem is a good example of this because it talks about the detail that the cities surrounding Jerusalem have all been destroyed except for Jerusalem itself. Next, we traveled north from Jerusalem to the biblical city of Shechem. So Shechem, here where I'm standing in the ruins of, is an important and interesting city in regards to the Amarna Letters, because we have letters that are sent from the ruler of Shechem himself, named Labayu, as well as letters that are sent from other rulers that are referring to him. And one that is really very interesting is letter number 289, and this is sent from Abdu Heba, the ruler of Jerusalem, to the Pharaoh of Egypt, and he is complaining that earlier Labayu, the ruler of Shechem, has given all the land of Shechem over to the Habiru. Abdi Heba says, or shall we do like Labayu, who gave the land of Shechem to the Habiru? So we learn in the Amarna Letters that the Habiru get the land of Shechem without a battle. So in the 1920s, when the Germans were excavating here, the German archaeologist Ernst Sellen found 2 cuneiform tablets in his excavations here at Shechem that dated to 1400 BC. So this is huge because it gives us an approximate date of 1400 BC. And we have the approximate dates of the pharaohs and their reigns that are being addressed in the tablets. And so this is very important chronological information that will help to identify who the Habiru people are. From Shechem, we continued on to Lachish. Behind me is the ancient city of Lachish, and in the Amarna Letters we have the ruler of Lachish that's killed in a separate incident, and then later the Habiru take control of the city. In the Amarna Letters we have 2 different rulers of Lachish named. In letter number 329, Zimredi is the ruler of Lachish, but then in letter number 288 the Habiru smote Zimreda of Lachisu. And later, letter number 330 is a message of Sipti Balu, the new ruler of Lachish. The note for these translations at the bottom of the page explain this by saying, Zimreda was prince of Lachish, and Shipti-Balu was to succeed him. The Habiru killed the king of Lachish, and we know that the city of Lachish continues as a Canaanite city because another Canaanite king begins to rule Lachish after the first king was killed. Then in a separate event covered in another place in the Amarna Letters, we have the city of Lachish being taken by the Habiru. Next, we traveled west to the city of Gezer. Letter number 299 is a message of Yapahu, the ruler of Gazru. This is the city of Gezer in the Bible, and Yapahu wrote, "To the king, my lord, since the Habiru are stronger than we, may the king, my lord, give me his help, and may the king, my lord, get me away from the Habiru, lest the Habiru destroy us." Behind me here is the Canaanite gate at the ancient city of Gezer. And in the Amarna Letters, we have the ruler of Gezer who is pleading with the Pharaoh of Egypt to send help because the Habiru are fighting against him. He says the war against the Habiru is severe and they are more powerful than he is. And he's asking the Pharaoh to send troops to save him or else he's going to be destroyed along with the city of Gezer. The ruler of Gezer is asking for military help from the Pharaoh of Egypt because he's in this severe conflict with the Habiru. And despite all this, nowhere in the Amarna Letters does it say that Gezer is taken by the Habiru. This matches with the archaeology of Gezer because there's no destruction level at this period, and in fact the archaeology shows that Gezer continues as an occupied Canaanite city. Finally, we travel from Gezer to the northern city of Hazor. In Hebrew the name is pronounced Hatzor, while in English it's pronounced Hazor. Amarna letter number 227 is a message of the king of Hazuru. This is the city of Hatzor in the Bible. In Amarna letter number 148, the king of Tyre says that the Habiru has taken over Hatzor. Now, the ancient city that I'm standing in, Hazor, is very interesting in the Amarna Letters because we both have letters that the king of Hazor sends to Pharaoh because of this conflict with the Habiru. And we also have a very important letter, letter number 148, that comes from the king of Tyre, who is on the Mediterranean coast, not too far away from here. And so the king of Tyre is writing to the Pharaoh and mentions that the city of Hazor is now under the control of the Habiru. So in the Bible, Hazor is called the head of all these kingdoms. This is the largest tell in the land of Canaan. And the king of Hatzor, who calls himself a king, is writing to the Pharaoh asking for help because of this attack of the Habiru. I mean, this is how powerful the Habiru are, that the largest city in all of Canaan is begging for help from the Pharaoh of Egypt. So who are the Habiru? Who are these people that are conquering these powerful Canaanite city-states? Well, the question is actually easily answered because when we look into historical sources right around this time period of 1400, are there any people that are claiming to conquer the land of Canaan? And the answer is clearly yes. The Israelites of the Old Testament. The Habiru are the Hebrew Israelites. And this isn't just my opinion. This is the opinion of early scholars who are making these obvious connections. Jorgen Alexander Knudsen, the scholar who wrote the landmark work on the Amarna Letters, wrote, "There is little objection to the view the Habiru are equated with the Hebrews." This theory is actually easy to test because all we have to do is take the details in the Amarna Letters and then compare them to the Israelite conquest in the Bible and see if we have a match. To begin our comparison, we'll go back to Lachish and see what the biblical record says. In Joshua chapter 10 we read, "So they brought the 5 kings out of the cave, the kings of Jerusalem, Hebron, Jarmuth, Lachish, and Eglon. Then Joshua put the kings to death. Then Joshua and all Israel with him moved on from Libnah to Lachish. He took up positions against it and attacked it. The Lord gave Lachish into Israel's hands. and Joshua took it on the second day. Behind me is the ancient city of Lachish, and in the Amarna Letters we have the ruler of Lachish that's killed in a separate incident, and then later the Habiru take control of the city. We have this same detail in the biblical account, where in the book of Joshua we have the king of Lachish who is killed in a battle, and then later in verse 32, the Israelites take the city of Lachish. Now in the next verse, Joshua 10 verse 33, the Bible mentions the king of Gezer. In the Amarna Letters, the king of Gezer is begging for help from the Pharaoh of Egypt, and yet in all of the Amarna Letters, we have no mention of the city of Gezer being taken by the Habiru. Now this war that we read about in the Amarna Letters between the ruler of Gezer and the Habiru is really interesting when we take into account the biblical record. The Bible says that the Israelites were not able to take this Canaanite city, and that Gezer did not become Israelite until the reign of King Solomon. Later in Joshua 11, the Bible talks about the Israelites' battle at Hazor. Joshua 11 says, "At that time Joshua turned back and captured Hazor and put its king to the sword. Everyone in it they put to the sword. They totally destroyed them, and he burned Hazor itself." Now this is a very intriguing site when it comes to the Amarna Letters, because letter 148 is a letter that is sent from the ruler of Tyre that says that the Habiru have taken Hatzor. So in Joshua 11 we have Hatzor destroyed by Joshua and the Israelites, and we know that the city of Hatzor continued as a Canaanite city after that, because later in Judges 4, we have another conflict that is between the Israelites and the king of Hatzor. And so we have two burn destructions here at Hazor. One from the Joshua period, which is the lower one that's down underneath our feet here, and then the upper one is from the Judges period, because for whatever reason, after they took this city in the time of Joshua, it remained a Canaanite city. We know this because there's another conflict with Hazor in the time of the Judges, at the time of Deborah and Barak. In Judges chapter 4, we read that, "Again the Israelites did evil, so that the Lord sold them into the hands of Jabin, king of Canaan, who reigned in Hatzor. So Deborah and Barak pressed harder and harder against Jabin, king of Canaan, until they destroyed him." And then it's after that later destruction that this city then becomes Israelite. When the Amarna Letters mention that Hatzor has been taken control of by the Habiru, this fits best with the details in the Judges chapter 4 conflict between the Israelites and the king of Hatzor. So in the mound of Hatzor, we have this massive destruction, which is the end of Canaanite Hatzor. And then later, a new city is built over the ruins of Canaanite Hatzor, and this is the Israelite city. So when we're thinking about the destruction of the Canaanite city of Hatzor that brings it to an end, the question is who did it? Now, I've been coming to Hazor for many, many years, and Dr. Bentor, who passed away this year, I've interviewed him many, many times, and he has this spiel, this famous spiel that he goes through about who destroyed the city of Hazor, and he goes through all the possibilities. There's only a few possibilities, and he goes through all the reasons why those aren't actually possibilities. And then he gets to the Israelites, where he says, the Israelites say that they did it. And this is true for this city of Hazor. It's also true for all of the land of Canaan. Who conquered the land of Canaan? The Habiru and the Amarna Letters are conquering the land of Canaan. They're taking Canaanite cities. So who are these people? Who is this group that is conquering the land of Canaan? Well, the Israelites say at this same time period that they're the ones who did it. They conquered the land of Canaan. And that is why archaeologically we have all these Canaanite cities becoming Israelite cities. And then in general, the land of Canaan becomes what afterwards? The land of Israel. Why? Because it's the Hebrew Israelites who conquer the land of Canaan. And that's why we know that the people in the Amarna Letters called the Habiru are the Hebrew Israelites. Next, we'll go back to Shechem to compare the Amarna account to the biblical account. In the Amarna Letters, we have the ruler of Shechem that gives his land over to the Habiru, and so does this match with the biblical record? And the answer is clearly yes. In Joshua 24, Joshua gathers the tribes of Israel to Shechem and made a covenant with the people. This is very strange because in the book of Joshua, we don't have a battle for Shechem mentioned. And also in the book of Joshua, we have this list of all these Canaanite kings that are killed by the Israelites, and the king of Shechem is not listed among them. So somehow we have Shechem being taken over by the Israelites without a battle. And this is exactly what we have in the Amarna Letters. This is not my interpretation. This is the interpretation of John Garstang, who excavated many Canaanite cities within the borders of Canaan and who believed and followed the biblical date for the conquest of 1400 BC. And like Knutson, he considered the Habiru and the Amarna Letters that were attacking Canaan to be equivalent with the Hebrew Israelites of the Old Testament. In his book, Joshua and Judges, in regard to Joshua's entry into Shechem, Garstang wrote, Joshua's last years, during which the settlement of the tribes began, may have overlapped to some extent the period covered by the Amarna Letters. The point is of great interest, as in some of these, direct reference is made to Shechem and the part played by its chief Libayu in the anti-Egyptian revolution of the day. Garstang believed that the Amarna letter account that Libayu had given over the land of Shechem to the Habiru, that this was directly related to the covenant renewal ceremony that takes place at the end of the book of Joshua in Joshua chapter 24. Garstang points out that the covenant renewal event at Shechem was at the end of Joshua's life, because in the chapter before, chapter 23, is Joshua's farewell to the leaders, where it says that Joshua by then was a very old man. Then comes the covenant renewal at Shechem as a kind of final act, followed by verse 29, which says, After these things, Joshua son of Nun, the servant of the Lord, died at the age of 110. And therefore he saw the end of Joshua's life contemporary with this Shechem event recorded in the Amarna Letters. However, this was not by any means the end of the conquest, since the book of Judges opens with the heading, Israel fights the remaining Canaanites, and says, after the death of Joshua, the Israelites asked the Lord, Who of us is to go up first to fight against the Canaanites? So the conquest continues on from the book of Joshua into the book of Judges, and it's really a lot of the details in this later Israelite conquest that match so well with the details found in the Amarna Letters of the Habiru. And a good example of this is the city of Jerusalem. So behind me are the ruins of ancient Jerusalem, and during the Amarna period, the ruler of Jerusalem, his name is Abdi-Heba. We know that the biblical conquest takes place over a long period of time, from Joshua all the way into the book of Judges. So the question is where does Abdi-Heba fit into it all? We know that he's not early in the conquest because the king that is killed in Joshua 11 by the Israelites is named Adoni-Zedek. So it makes the most sense that Abdi-Heba comes later in the conquest, because by his time, then the land has already been lost. The cities have already been conquered. Jerusalem has already become like a ship in the midst of the sea. And so these details fit very well with the biblical record, because Jerusalem remains Jebusite, Jebusite being one of the Canaanite tribes, all the way up until the time King David conquers it. So Jerusalem, a Canaanite city surrounded by Israelite cities, in the Bible, matches very well with the details in the Amarna Letters saying that Jerusalem is like this Canaanite ship being surrounded by a sea of Habiru. Also, through the excavations of Dr. Ilat Mazar in Jerusalem, she found a fragment of an Amarna letter here in Jerusalem that she believes is written by the same scribe as the letters that were found in Amarna from that archive. This is amazing because so many scholars argue that Jerusalem was not an occupied city in the time period of the Late Bronze 1 period when the Bible says that the conquest took place. Well, if it's not an occupied city, then why is there a Amarna letter here? And why is the ruler of Jerusalem writing letters to the Pharaoh in Egypt? The evidence clearly shows that there is a city here at that time, and the description of what happens to that city, becoming like a ship in the midst of the sea, is exactly what we read in the Bible. That Jerusalem is like a ship in the midst of the sea as a Canaanite city until it finally becomes Israelite, having been conquered by King David himself. One thing that's important to understand is that there are many, many Amarna letters that are being sent to Amenhotep III and to his son Akhenaten in Egypt. I've just chosen 5 Canaanite cities that serve as an example, but there are many, many more. And despite all this, the majority view of scholars today is that the Habiru of the Amarna letters are not the Hebrew Israelites of the Bible. But if you think about it, who else could they be? People forget that archaeologists, all archaeologists agree, and historians that deal with these periods agree that Canaan, the land of Canaan, becomes the land of Israel. And that these Canaanite cities, something happens to them. Of course, they don't agree what it is that happened to them, but they all agree that they cease to be Canaanite, and then what do they become next? Israelite. And there's no archaeological layers in between the Canaanite layers and the Israelite layers. And there's no historical events recorded in the historical sources in between the Canaanite cities that then become Israelite cities, or the land of Canaan becoming Israel. It's so obvious. And the reason that it's not obvious today is because the secular view presumes that Israel didn't exist in this period that the Bible says the conquest happened. And so they presume that they didn't exist then, therefore the Habiru can't possibly be the Hebrew Israelites. In the same way, the late daters who believe in the Exodus and the conquest believe that it happened a couple centuries later in the 13th century BC rather than the 15th century BC. And so they presume also that the Israelites, the conquest hadn't happened at this time period, therefore the Habiru can't be the Hebrew Israelites. What is obvious, according to the evidence itself, is that these letters are referring to the Hebrew Israelites. That's who the Habiru are. Because they come in, they take over the land, Jerusalem becomes like a ship in the midst of the sea, which it remains until it's conquered by King David, who was born in Bethlehem, which in the Amarna Letters also says was conquered by the Habiru. It's so plain and simple, and to early scholars, they understood these things. They understood the connection. They identified the Habiru as the Hebrew Israelites. It wasn't until later that all these arguments and all this skepticism came about to disconnect the evidence from the biblical account. The land of Canaan becomes the land of Israel because Israel is the one who conquered the land of Canaan. And these are the Hebrews of the Old Testament and the Habiru of the Amarna Letters. So why does this even matter? Well, it matters because what has happened in the ancient past is as real as what's still going to happen in the future. In the past, Joshua and the Israelites really did come in and conquer the land of Canaan and made it into the kingdom of Israel. In the future, Jesus is going to return and he's going to conquer the earth and make the whole earth his kingdom. And you don't want to be against him, you want to be for him. You don't want to be on the side of those being conquered, but on the side of the conqueror. And we do this by believing and following Jesus. I quickly want to tell you about a friend of mine named Nathan Lundquist, and he used to live with me in Jerusalem and was part of Expedition Bible. And he's coming out with a documentary called Off School Property. This documentary is about bringing the Bible back into the public school day. And so it's going to be shown in 1,000 theaters across America on October 23rd. And I'm going to leave a link so that you can see where those showings are happening and you can watch the movie trailer. I really encourage you to check it out. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It really helps get this information out. I'll leave a link where you can order a copy of my book, Where God Came Down, the Archaeological Evidence. Thanks for making it #1 in archaeology. I'll also leave a donation link where you can leave a tax-deductible donation. And we have a whole YouTube channel with videos like this. You can watch another one here. And thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.